Okay, great. Hi, everybody. So as I was saying, this past year, I took mainly two trips. The greatest one was to Africa. Um, I also took one to Texas. I submitted slides for both. I guess they're going to be in like two sections. So we'll start off with Africa. Um, I don't know how I am to
Yeah,
advance this,
well,
or you do?
it would be helpful if mine would advance too.
Oh, okay.
I got the wrong stuff there. Come on, dude. Ah, there you go. You got one. Is that the right first
No,
one?
that's not mine.
Jesus Christmas. All right, stop the recording again. Stop the recording. What's going on here?
Ah, there we go. Oh, you have names on everything. Oh, good. Okay.
But wait a minute. Let me see if it'll progress. Right now,
Okay.
I was okay. It's progressing now. Okay,
Okay.
very good. Go.
All right. So, okay. So we started off in in South Africa, and one of the best places to go to is the Botanical Gardens in Cape Town, and that's where we saw this Cape Robin chat. There were just so many fantastic birds there. I, since only limited to 50 pictures, I just tried to pick ones that I had decent photos of, and that maybe aren't the bird that everybody's going to see. I was trying to see many of those smaller birds. So southern double-collared sunbird and the Cape white-eye, Cape bulbul. I thought it looked like it had googly eyes. The speckled mouse bird, they were very interesting because they would climb among the trees, kind of monkey-like. And one of my favorite ones that I brought home a little carving of is the helmeted guinea fowl. Their eyes just look like something out of the 70s psychedelic era or something. There's spots on their bodies. And the speckled pigeon, that was actually back at our hotel in Cape Town. The red-faced mouse bird, let me see if that was still in the same location. Yeah, I think that was also that was over by Simonstown, by where we saw the penguins, which you'll see a picture of. There's our African penguin in its nest. Some of them made burrows, and some of them just made nests out of a few twigs on the beaches. And what sight that kind of surprised us was seeing a common ostrich with the ocean in the background. We also visited the Cape Town Water Treatment Center, and we had wonderful birds there. The southern masked weaver, the Cape sparrow we saw at the Cape of Good Hope. And then we went up to visit some wineries because not everybody wanted to do bird watching all the time. Can you believe that? So this was in Stellenbosch in South Africa. This was blue crane. There were about 3 of them out in a field. So I was able to get a picture of them there. Black-fronted bulbul. And the fork-tailed drongo. This is up the black-fronted bulbul and the fork-tailed drongo was when we went to Botswana. We started our safari. This was when we arrived in Maun, was where we picked up our safari company. And a crested barbet, that was in Jankanaka, I think is how you pronounce it, area of Botswana. The African green pigeon, the green hoopoe, wood hoopoe, the southern ground hornbill, which I understand is, I believe it's endangered. They are a, like many of the hornbills, they are a scavenger and they walk along the ground. They were pretty cool. Then we got to Kwai. And this is an immature hooded vulture feeding off an elephant's foot. Hammerkop, an African fish eagle, Mayer's parrot, little bee eater, magpie shrike, and this is one bird that I really wanted to see. When I saw the picture of it in my guidebook, I thought that would be the coolest, to see an owl with pink eyelids. Just was a fantastic idea. And my friend actually spotted it up in a tree. So I was very excited to get this one. He was very far away, so it's not the greatest photograph, and he's huge. The Bradfield's hornbill, that was in Svabuti. The swallow-tailed bee eaters. Bee eaters were beautiful little birds, just swooping and flitting all over the place in among pretty much dead trees. So it was great to see color among all the dead, because it was, this was in August that I went there. So it was very much still a dry season. It was winter. It was very cold at night, down to freezing. And then it warmed up throughout the day until it was about, I guess probably up to 60 or so, maybe even higher than that at times. The gray go-away bird, it's named that because of, it says go away. Southern red-billed hornbill. And this is in Chobe National Park. And this bird was absolutely amazing to see, because our driver actually spotted it as he was driving. And even though he stopped and he kept saying, there's a barred owlet in there, it took us all a while to actually find the bird in among the branches. So it just amazed me that the driver, Frank, was able to find the bird. See it right off the bat. Lilac-breasted roller, which was, we had a contest trying to get this bird in flight in a roll. I never saw it roll. Only one other person did see it roll. That's the bird on the left. The southern Carmen bee eater. This was the only time we actually saw it. Beautiful birds. The pied kingfisher. And the wattled lapwing. I seem to remember somebody else had a picture of one. I think it was Shirley during one of her presentations. I love their green legs with their yellow wattles, blue eyes. That was a very fascinating bird to watch. The colors are great. Senegal cuckoo. And a group of the great white pelicans. Loved all their coloration in their faces and their bills. This little bird we saw up at Victoria Falls, that's in Zimbabwe. We crossed over mainly to see the falls. I thought they were pretty neat, but I like the birds better. The grayback Cameroptera. And the emerald spotted wood pigeon. Wood dove, I'm sorry. And then this spring I went to Texas. We drove around a good bit. The kingbird we saw at Lake Casablanca. beautiful green jays at Mission, Texas. And this bird, the verdin, this took me a long time to get a photo of him. He had been spotted. I was told where the nest was. You could see it from the boardwalk, but I had to pretty much stake it out, and we had to wait 20 minutes or so before he reappeared to go to the nest. They were still carrying nesting material to the nest. And here's a lifer bird for me, the orange-crowned warbler. And the Altamira oriole. This buff-bellied hummingbird, I saw it at, let me see, where was that? The Estero Llano Grande State Park. Mottled ducks, the male is the yellow-billed and the female has orange bill. Black-bellied whistling duck. We saw them down at South Padre Island. Another birder said this, these ducks remind them of zombies. They just seemed mechanical and they didn't seem real. This great blue heron, he actually ended up dropping the fish after many attempts to try to swallow it. And here's a picture of Coot. I loved the fact I could actually see the feet because he was out of water. And this is a redhead. And that's all my slides. Thank you, Lois. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, I decided to just do a little bit from my recent trip to Fort DeSoto in Florida. It's in the mouth of the Tampa Bay. And right at the beginning, I had these loggerhead shrikes on a welcome sign. I thought, well, that's kind of nice. And one of them allowed me to get close enough to be able to see the tooth part of the bill, or to help it tear apart the meat, because it is a predator songbird. Black-bellied plovers, there was quite a number of them, and I was lucky to get this one up fairly close. And this one here, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it or not, but he's tugging on a worm that's the longest worm I've ever seen, and pulling out of the sand there. Short-billed dowitcher, and just guessing that's what it is. This is definitely a least sandpiper with the yellow legs coming into land. Sanderling, quite a few of those running around, and it was fun to watch. This is a western willet. Almost all the eastern willets leave the United States in the wintertime. The western willets come from the interior and stay the winter along the shores that were from New Jersey down to Texas. And they have a longer bill. They're more plain. I got a big lecture on it this one time, so I'm like the current expert locally. But this is a western willet. Ruddy turnstone. We saw this, I think it's a scallop, and he was kind of curious about it. He spun it around, checked it from the other side, and got a couple nibbles out of it. Marbled godwit coming into land at the shoreline. And he fed along really close to me. I was able to get down really low and get nice shots as he's feeding at the shore. And after he pulled his bill out, he kind of snapped it, and all these little bits of water went flying. And then he just did this weird thing where it makes the tip of the bill bend up. That's one that helps them to pull out prey from deep down in the sand. And of course, he had to have a little bit of a shakeout and a little bit of a clean himself up. And then something startled him. He took off, and then there's a couple royal terns in close, and they followed quickly after that. But over in the open water, there was pelicans diving. And sometimes the pelicans would come in really close. And I don't like to clip off the wingtips of a bird unless I'm clipping both wingtips at once, because he was just too close to get all in the frame. Osprey catching a fish, tugging it out. Turns out it's an ocean catfish. Skimmers came and started skimming very close to shore, really close, nicely lit up. He's been trying to step off like he's a petrel. Royal terns, there was quite a few on the beach. It was better to see them doing something. It was cruising. This one here I saw, I couldn't tell what was going on. There's something was splashing in the water. A series of that. He dove in, popped out. It turned out it was a dolphin who was stirring up something, and he was trying to share the meal. Leftovers anyways. Reddish egret. And it's a real, Fort DeSoto is one of the best places to see reddish egrets performing and dancing and catching fish. Jim caught something, tossed it back. Piping plovers. There was quite a few of them that day, and here's one of them, kind of surrounded by royal terns. Give you some idea about the scale of these little guys. This close piping plover was being chased by a ruddy turnstone because the piping plover had a worm, and the turnstone is much bigger, but is not as fast. And this guy here, he caught a worm, and he was determined to pull up this thing. Finally, he decided he's going to try flying away with it, tugging, and another flapping. Finally comes out and then hits him in the face. And he's like, whoa, I caught it. And off he goes. Yes, I'm flat on the sand. Yeah. I normally would use a brace called a skimmer pod just to hold it up, but I didn't bring this. I was trying to be minimalist on this trip in preparation for another trip. Next is Bob Pierce.
Hi, everyone. I apologize for the sound. I'm sitting in a lounge area, and there may be some people walking by, but hopefully you'll be able to hear me. I've had a pretty good year since I talked to you last year for the members' photos. And thanks to the miracle of modern science and the graces of spiritual power and the help of friends and relatives and calls from a lot of you guys, I've been doing real well. Special shout out to John McNamara, John Mercer, and Mary Bleeker too. So anyway, if you want to start, John, I had a small trip to California, and there I was able to see this Anis hummingbird feeding on a very strange silver torch cactus. I was glad to get the photo. Also, an Anis hummingbird on some trumpet flowers across from a little casita where I was staying. We went to Huntington Gardens, which is in Pasadena, California, and I heard this bird that sounded a lot like a squawking blue jay. And I looked up and saw this character. Apparently, these red whiskered boobles are an invasive species. They were introduced to the States in Florida from India. And there's a small number of them now in California. But they are a great looking bird. But like I say, behavior wise, a lot like a blue jay. And here they feed on the ground. And this one had just devoured half of a lizard, still has part of the lizard in its tail. I got another shot of an Allen's hummingbird on one of these strange flowering trees where the flowers come out first, flower petals drop, and then the tree will bloom. It was nice to get these hummingbirds there. Also on the ground, I was able to see these dark-eyed juncos, the Orican group of juncos, just fed on the ground for worms and ants and other kinds of insects. but a little bit different from the dark-eyed juncos that we see in the east and that we see in Michigan. Another bird that we saw out at the Malibu Lagoon was a western willet. And of course, they are there in April, these western willets. I was back in Pennsylvania a few times to visit friends and relatives. Made one trip down to Bombay Hook. Was able to get a nice shot of a blue grosbeak. And a marsh wren popped out of the reeds, landed on one of these, excuse me, one of these cigar-looking weeds. I'm not sure if it's a cattail or not, but posed and sang for me. I was glad to get this shot. And I was able to get a really good shot of a black-capped chickadee. You can clearly see the hockey stick on its wing. I got this one in the fall. And then later in the winter, right after an ice storm, I got this black-capped chickadee sitting on ice in the bushes with a lot of bling on its legs. It's one that's been followed by a local bander. Also last fall, I was able to see a downy woodpecker with some nice fall colors in the background. And up north in Michigan, in Crawford County, where the Kirtland's warbler nests, you can also find some other wonderful species. I was able to get a nice shot of this evening grosbeak. In the fields in the winter, in my county, Calhoun County, there are still numbers of horned larks around that trample through the snow, try to get to a little patch that's been melted and find some corn cobs and go after the kernels. Also, red-winged blackbirds will line some of these farm roads in Calhoun County, and I was able to get them in the evening light, doing its normal squawking to get me out of the way. Also, just as we have in the east, white-breasted nuthatches. I thought this was a nice shot with the yellow in the background. I watched these mallards one day afternoon that were riding out one of our snowstorms. It was probably 17 degrees that day, so they were trying to get huddled close together and ride out the storm. Purple finches. There was one place that I go to in the county that always seems in the fall to have the purple finches. I was lucky to get a nice shot of this one perched. Also up north in Crawford County near the Hartwick Pines State Park, which is where you can get a Kirtland's Warblers tour. I was able to get a nice shot of a rose-breasted grosbeak out in the open. I did make it to the shore last summer once, and of course, it's almost obligatory now to take a short hop down to the Ocean City Rookery. So I went there for a couple of mornings, got a nice black-crowned night heron in flight. This yellow-crowned night heron, I was glad to get this picture of its wings coming out and erecting its feathers in the back, a little bit different than just a straight-on pose. Also at the rookery. And of course, large numbers of glossy ibis fly in and out. And as you know, if the bird catches the light properly, you can get those wonderful colors on the wings. Also down the shore, a red-bellied woodpecker popped out of just on the side of a tree and landed at the top of a snag. So it was nice to get a portrait of him out in the open. Also at the rookery, white ibises have made wonderful appearances in the last 4 or 5 years. It seems to be more and more of them every year. This is a nice portrait, I think, of the pink legs and pink bill and pink face. And it took me a long time to try to get a good shot of them in flight with the wings spread out so you could see the black tips. I think this is representative of their flight pattern. When I was at when I was at McGee Marsh last spring, and last spring I presented all kinds of warblers from from McGee Marsh. This is a few shots from other species that were there. So got this Baltimore Oracle snagging a little midge from the leaf there. I was able to catch a blue-eyed gnatcatcher who was definitely giving me the stink eye. I love the little black V above his eyes. He looks mean. Also nesting there on the ground out by the beach was a killdeer. And if you look carefully, you can see two speckled eggs right in the shadow there. Nice to get that shot. I also was able to get a Philadelphia vireo. At first, I thought it was a warbling vireo, but John Mercer and I troubleshot a little bit more, and with that yellow, brighter yellow under the throat, we think it's a Philadelphia vireo. It was nice to get Philadelphia out in the open like that and get a pretty clear shot of it. Also, at Howard Marsh in northern Ohio, the last couple of years has been at least one pair of nesting yellow-headed blackbirds. And this is one of the furthest places east where they've been nesting rather frequently. So it's nice to get a good shot of them wandering in the grass looking for insects. This is the male. Also at Howard Marsh, I was able to get a nice close-up of a blue-winged teal who was off to a nest, meeting a female at the nest. Yes, back in Pennsylvania in the fall last year, I found this ruby-crowned kinglet flying around. It was nice to get him in a background where you see some of the fall colors on the leaves changing. So it took me a while to get the shot, but I think it worked out well. Next, I wanted to share with you about 10 shots of sandhill cranes. I've been fascinated by them ever since I've come to Western Michigan. In October, November, and early December, they will use Southwest Michigan as a staging area. So I would go out a couple times a week looking for them. So I found one in flight, and then you'll see many in flight, usually at dusk going back to their roosting places. And if you catch them right in the light at sunset, you can get some nice photos as well. They will take off close to the ground. You may not be able to see this, but the sandhill crane on the right has the red patch on its forehead, but the one on the left doesn't yet. So the one on the left is immature. Also in the fall, when the cranes start to pair up, you might see a male displaying its strength, its dominance, and perhaps show off for some of the females. And what they might do periodically is go on the ground, pick up something, in this case a corn husk, and throw it up in the air as part of their dance. I tried a number of times to get a good flight shot of a tandem pair. So this one worked for me. And I got a nice group with some fall foliage in the background just this past fall. And also in the fall, a pair, and they do pair for life. This pair walking through, getting a few more kernels for the day, kernels of corn. And they will hang around in early December. So you will see some smaller flocks in the cornfields in Calhoun County. And when it starts to get really cold, about the 15th of December, excuse me, that's when they'll start to fly away. And these two I call the sentinels. They're on the lookout for any danger around as the other flocks feed in the background. Also, I was happy to see these trumpeter swans in our county. Michigan State University, along with a number of groups in Canada, have been taking some trumpeter swans from Canada and some eggs, bringing them to Michigan and reintroducing them to the areas in Michigan where they were frequent before. And they've made wonderful progress. So this was a frozen pond, and these two trumpeter swans were in this lovebird position. I like the heart-shaped necks and beaks there. To show you a difference in size, on this lake also there were tundra swans and trumpeter swans. The swan on the left, the taller one, is the trumpeter swan, or excuse me, on the right. The swan on the left is the tundra swan, and you may be able to see a little bit of yellow on the trumpeter swan beak. So you can see the difference in the size and the shape of the beak. So I thought that was a good comparison shot. I was lucky to get it. The trumpeters now are mating and nesting and hatching chicks. In this case, an adult had 6 cygnets on a pond. Another group of trumpeters had 7 cygnets. It's wonderful to hear them in the fall come from far off with this wonderful trumpeter sound that gives them the name and make landings on these ponds. So I was trying to catch them with the feet right on the landing, and I got the guy on the left, so I was happy with that shot. And once again, I wanted to feature the trumpeter swans and the sandhill crane swans from where I am in Michigan, and I appreciate getting me back on this year, and glad to be with you.
So presenters should take a look at the chats because people have been making comments, very nice comments. So take a look.
Those were tough acts to follow. And I don't know what I have here because they were thinned considerably, so we'll see. I went on several trips last year, and so these are sort of in chronological order, and I started with Alaska in June and July, and the beginning of the trip, it wasn't a birding trip, but it was to see grizzly bears. The beginning of the trip, we started in Fairbanks, and we went to Denali, and there were fires in Fairbanks. And it was
Can you move closer to the microphone, please? We can't hear you.
Is that better? It was very smoky in Fairbanks, and the smoke traveled south to Denali, so we weren't able to see much because of the smoke. We think the mountain was there, but we weren't sure. And there were, the road is closed after a certain point because of landslides and melting permafrost. So all we saw was, we saw this family of common ravens, and then we saw these short-billed gulls on the vents for the restrooms. Then we moved further south, and the smoke didn't cross the mountains, so we were able to see Denali. And then we went further south towards the Kenai Peninsula and stopped in a refuge where there were blue-winged teal, and there were a number of ducks, but there was a mother with babies. Then we went further south and did some hiking, and I came across this spruce grouse, and this is the female. Then along the road, there's a place called Tern Lake where you think you would see terns, but our first trip there on the way south, we didn't see any terns. We did see a greater scaup, and later on a bald eagle carrying a fish. This was as we got down towards the water around Seward. On the way back, we did see an Arctic tern at Tern Lake. Then we went we stayed at a place called Fox Island for 2 days, and we went on a boat cruise to see birds, animals, whales, glaciers, And this is the only tufted puffin we saw. Alaska has tufted puffins and horned puffins. So this is the horned puffin. We did see a fair number of them. This is one taking off right at us. This was an interesting bird. This is also the only ones we saw of these. It's called the rhinoceros auklet. And you can't really see it, but there's a little horn. These are marbled murrelets. And then right behind our cabin, there was a pair of varied thrush. It's a very pretty bird that I had not seen before. And this is the female, not quite as pretty, but very thrush-like. We finally made it to Brooks Falls. The first trip, the first day was canceled because of fog, because we flew in on a float plane. And this was the goal of the trip, was to see the brown bears feeding on salmon. And the gulls also feed on salmon. They get the leftovers. So here you can see the gull waiting for the bear. The Brooks Falls area also had, it has a river and it connects two lakes. So this is a family of common mergansers on the river. Looks like that's it for Alaska. In September, we were supposed to go to Madagascar, which was canceled again, but is on for this year in October. So instead of going to Madagascar, we went whale watching in Quebec. This is a humpback whale. These flock of common eiders flew past our boat. And then we saw a few other birds. This black guillemot in winter plumage was hard for me to identify because it wasn't the right plumage. This is September, but I did find a picture that said, oh, it looks like that. So that's what that is. There were cormorants, double-breasted cormorant. This one was taking off. And most of the birds had left Quebec because it was the end of September, so they had headed south. On to way further south. In January, I went to Antarctica. That trip was also canceled twice, but we made it this year. So we started in Tierra del Fuego National Park, and this is a dolphin gull. And then there are these little islands there with a lighthouse, and they were covered with cormorants and also seals. So this is the imperial cormorant. And the other ones, there's another imperial cormorant with a kelp goose. This is the female kelp goose. They were harder to spot among the cormorants.
Please speak up.
And this is the rock cormorant. Then we headed for Antarctica, and through the Drake Passage, birds followed us, particularly at the beginning. So this is the black-browed albatross. And Cape petrels also like to follow the boats. They also call them pintado petrels. And here's another one. Then, of course, what you see in Antarctica, or what you want to see, are penguins. There are millions of penguins. We could not land at this particular island because it was too windy. The water was too rough, but we got to see the penguins from the ship. So that was our first view of penguins. Brown Bluff, we also weren't able to land, but we were able to take Zodiac rides around the island. So these are mostly Adelie penguins were the ones we saw. And they were all over. You can see the gray ones are the juveniles, and they're mostly begging for food. And they're surprisingly agile. They jump over these rocks. And they're everywhere, just millions of penguins. And then the babies are constantly begging for food. And they don't all seem to know their parents because they were begging from other parents that would walk away and then they'd find their parent who would feed them. The hill in the background was also covered with what looked like penguins, but on closer view, they're actually cormorants. And then the penguins were all along the shore as well. And some of them seemed hesitant about jumping in the water. We said, gee, you know, they're used to cold water. And then we realized there are seals in the water waiting to eat them. It was fun watching them swim. They porpoise. They look like porpoises. And they just swim along and they followed our boat. Then we took another Zodiac ride around Heroina Island. More penguins on ice. I was looking at Bob's pictures because we don't have snow anymore here. Seems that way. So this is a different kind of penguin here. Among the Adelies, there was this chinstrap penguin. So we didn't see very many of them, but they're all about the same size. They're maybe a foot and a half tall. The three kinds we saw, which you haven't seen the third one yet. There are three chinstraps doing a little dance routine. This is a southern giant petrel. Our guide said, oh, these white morphs are very rare. And then I looked it up and it's about 10%, so it's not so rare. But we saw a few of them, but mostly not the white morph. This is a funny looking bird called a snowy sheathbill. And it's the only bird in Antarctica that does not have webbed feet. But in spite of that, it seems to prefer to walk. It doesn't like to fly. It can fly, but it doesn't like to fly, and it doesn't like to swim. And it's sort of a cross between a chicken and a pigeon and maybe a parrot. And here are some snowy sheathbills checking out this sleeping leopard seal that looks like he has blood on his mouth. We did see some penguins with red chests. This is another island, Tay Head it was called, and there were giant petrels resting, and they told us don't get close to them because if you get close to them, they vomit on you. So we stayed a distance away. There were also kelp gulls there, and brown skuas. The skuas can also be nasty. This one was flying over Deception Island, which is an old volcanic crater. And then we did see this Gentoo penguin as we were getting ready to get back on the boat. So I had to unpack my camera gear again and get a picture of this Gentoo penguin, which here's a close-up. So they look like they have lipstick on them. And then again, on the way back, petrels followed the ship and black-browed albatross followed us. Sometimes flying in formation. Then we got back to Ushuaia, which is the tip of Argentina, and there are more dolphin gulls. The one with the gray head is the juvenile. And that was it.
Okay, so since we did the members' photos last year, I've traveled to a number of places. I did a Danube River cruise in Europe, and I was up in Vermont and did a birdathon. I was in California visiting family, and just this past April, I was in Costa Rica. So what follows is going to be an assortment of photos from there as well as local birding spots. We'll start off with State Game Lands 43 and a nice male hooded warbler. And then last May, there was an influx of Arctic terns along the Atlantic coast states, and Marsh Creek had at least 3 of them. So here's a picture of one that was there. And one of them shaking off water right after an unsuccessful dive. Up in Vermont, like I mentioned earlier, I did a birdathon. And one of the things we had on the birdathon, there's a good place up there for winged warblers. We had this golden winged warbler and the Brewster's warbler, which is a hybrid, as it says, between a blue winged and a golden winged. Back home here, State Game Lands 43 again, and I was getting ready for, I didn't know, I guess this was right after the birding blitz that we had here, and just saw this goldfinch on the thistle and thought it made a nice photo. Then off to Europe on the river cruise, and I did, even though it wasn't a birding trip, my brother and I did a lot of birding. Here's a Eurasian blackbird in Slovakia, obviously gathering food for some nestlings. And a hooded crow and a carrion crow. In Germany, we were at a park that was called the English Garden. It wasn't anything like I would have thought as far as a garden was concerned. It was really just a large park. But they had some nice bodies of water there, and the red-crested pochard was preening itself. And a bar-headed goose. The bar-headed geese are not native to Germany, but they've been brought there and have established themselves, and they have a feral population there. So they're actually countable as a species in Germany, according to eBird, that is. While I was in Europe, I was monitoring the eBird alerts from back home and started seeing alerts about wood storks down by Octorara Reservoir. I thought, oh, gee, it would be really great if they stayed around long enough that I could see them when I got back home. And sure enough, I couldn't go right away, but about 3 days after I got home, I went down and actually did see there were 4 of them. They were immature birds at not far from the reservoir, but in Lancaster County. And they were by a creek that was actually the Octorara Creek. And when they flew across the creek and went into Chester County, I was able to get them for both counties. Back up in Vermont, just doing some birding up there. We had this Wilson snipe. And then back home again, there was reports of a brown booby up in Peace Valley Park. And so as soon as I got word of that, I went up to see it. Wasn't able to get any great pictures of it, but certainly got good looks at it, and added that species to my Pennsylvania list. Then in September, there was a report of a black-throated gray warbler in Wilson Farm Park, which is only about 35 minutes from my house. It's in Chester County. And so I went up there, got some pictures of it. And it turns out it was only seen that day. Last year's Cape May trip for the club ended up getting canceled due to weather, but I was down in Cape May a little bit later and birding on my own and had this blackpoll warbler. You can see the nice yellow-orange legs and feet
I'll have a little piece of one.
that you
Oh.
can still distinguish, help distinguish this bird in the fall from bay-breasted. And it's always nice when we can get Philadelphia vireos down there as well. And this was really a nice yellow one. And up at the Wetlands Institute, this flicker was just feeding out on the lawn and seemed pretty oblivious to those of us who were trying to get some photos. Then out in November, I was out to visit family out in the Los Angeles area. And there's a couple of parks that I like to try to go to there, as well as I like to try a new park each time I'm out there. And I was able to get a picture of this Allen's hummingbird at a park that's called Pollywog Park. Black and white warbler, Townsend's warbler, and orange crown warbler. And out in California, for those of you who have been out there, you know that orange crown warblers are much easier to see out there than they are here. In this one park called Ken Malloy Harbor Regional Park, I saw this sapsucker, which I initially thought was a red-naped sapsucker, and then realized that it had too much red on the head and on the breast. I started doing some looking. I realized while I was there that there was a potential that it could be a hybrid between red-naped and red-breasted sapsucker. So I took a whole bunch of pictures and sent them out to, I think I put them on Facebook and asked for some advice, and basically got confirmation that yes, this is a hybrid between the two, and that is a known area for the hybridization of the two species. Also in that park, there's greater white-fronted geese, and coot that was posing nicely. I always enjoy the red eye. Then in the end of November, down in Aspen, Pennsylvania, just off of 322, there were reports of a hermit warbler, the first one ever in Pennsylvania. And I went down to try to see that, and then it was not successful. And I went down again a few days later, and I did succeed, and I managed to get a few photos, but it was being very, very elusive in the white pine trees there. This was about the best picture that I was able to get. Now, I'm a member of the Pennsylvania Society of Ornithology, which I know some of you all are as well, and they have a quarterly journal, and they always put out a call for photos, and I usually send in a photo each quarter, and they put them in, and a lot of times I get one in the photo display, but this time they decided to put mine on the cover, so I thought that was pretty cool. In December, I was birding the Brandywine Meadow Preserve, and this fox sparrow popped up. And this red-bellied woodpecker was up at Homestead Road up in February. Nearby was this kestrel. On the day of the club's great backyard bird count, I was out a number of places around the county, and one of them being Wilson Road, and there were some meadowlarks there being quite active, and I was able to get this shot of the meadowlark in flight. Then about a week later, I was down in Nottingham Park trying to see the red crossbills that everybody else was going to see, and I didn't have a chance to get there. But they hung around, and I got some nice pictures. I got this immature bird and this adult male, and this young male changing into adult plumage. Then in March, early March, the club's woodcock walk in Marsh Creek. The first thing we do is we usually watch the lake, see what's out on the lake. And while we were doing that, the bald eagle came by and didn't quite catch it in front of the moon, but came close. In April, I was down in Costa Rica, and we found this ferruginous pygmy owl. There was actually a pair of them there, and a cavity where they were nesting, and this guy was giving me the stink eye. This yellow-throated toucan posed very nicely for me. Laughing falcon. And fiery-throated hummingbird. I was trying desperately to get the right angle on these hummingbirds to try to get a fiery throat, because you don't have to get very far off from the front angle and you just don't get the color. So I was very fortunate to get this shot. And green thorntail, which is a type of hummingbird. And the snowcap. Black-crested coquette. And some of the areas that we were in, the scarlet macaws, were easy to get. And in this shot, they were in a tree that was only about 20 feet high, and there were about 9 of them. And they were just chowing down on the nuts that were the fruit of this tree. And they didn't seem bothered at all by us standing pretty close to the tree and taking pictures. And that was it. Thank you.
Thanks, John, or thank you. Very, very nice.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll be the last one up for today, and as I do every year, I'm going to go through the trips for the year and try and entice some of you folks to come on my trips. Okay, so starting from May of last year to the beginning of May this year, May 1st, 2022, Cheslin Preserve, a nice yellow warbler. And at the same place, a nice blue-gray gnatcatcher. Okay, and later May we did Forsyth and a white-eyed vireo, which is not one you expect in Forsyth usually. Chipping sparrow. And dunlins, which you would expect in Forsyth. And semi-palmated sandpiper and a couple of red knots behind. Semi-palmated is one that was pictured. Least sandpiper, again, you can see the yellow legs that definitely make this at least. And the next day in Hibernia, a pretty ratty looking male towhee. And a Canada in Sullivan County near the end of the month, a nice look at a Canada warbler. Black-throated green warbler. And a Blackburnian warbler trying to grab some spider webs or something for its nest, but you can really see the yellow throat. Again, you can see the beautiful yellow throat on the Blackburnian warbler. And Warwick Park had a muscovy duck, ugly bird if ever was one. And eastern wood pewee up on a nest. Cedar waxwings, checking out the berries. I love the cedar waxwings. Pretty bird. Chino Farms is one of the years we did Chino Farms. We had grasshopper sparrows down there. A couple of them. And then Ramsey Road. We did a fall walk at Ramsey Road and got a yellow-billed cuckoo looking over his shoulder at me. Eastern wood pewee up on a branch. And a female common yellowthroat. Armis led a trip to Elk Neck State Park in Maryland, and it's not a bird, it's a zebra tiger swallowtail. But what was exciting about that is this is the furthest north spot where you can find this butterfly. So Armis was excited. And Great Marsh, a nice ruby crowned kinglet. And cedar waxwing mom feeding the babies. Forsyth, Dunlin, their winter plumages. And boat-billed grackle. Lesser yellow legs flying by. Tell by the size of the bill it's a lesser. And the yellow-crowned night heron hiding in the weeds there. The yellow rump warblers were around. It's kind of late in the year, but they're down there at that time of year. And black-crowned night heron. And in December, we do Barnegat Light to Brigantine or Forsyth. I shortened to Barnegat Brig because it doesn't fit Barnegat Light to Forsyth. Anyhow, we had nice close birds like ruddy turnstones, black scoters, close purple sandpipers. And it's always good for harlequin ducks. Such pretty birds. A couple Bonaparte gulls were flying around. A herring gull, not an adult. And green-winged teal. And a western sandpiper with a little droopy bill. A male and female northern shovelers. And male and female pintails. The Great Marsh, we had rusty blackbird. It has a nice picture of the rusty blackbirds. I just stick that one in. And northern mockingbirds. Shark River, we trip we lead up there every year for our winter ducks. Had nice hooded mergansers. Pretty little fellow with a big top knot. Ruddy ducks. Great blackback gull. This is a juvenile because it's not blackback. And a ring-billed gull. That was a black duck with a couple of mallards behind it. Really see the difference in the color between that one and the one behind it. Herring gull. Common loon. This guy had gone down and grabbed something and was trying to swallow it down and eventually got it down. At Bryn Coed in February, bald eagle flew over. Bombay hook, the trip down there in middle of February. Hard to find when the corn stalks was horned larks. And we got tundra swans flying over. Gadwall, next male gadwall. And then Hines in late February, a mute swan. Ruby crowned kinglet, nice and close. American widgeon, the males, greenhead, formerly known as bald pate. Red-breasted nuthatches on our Chester County ducks trip. So what do we get? We got a nuthatch, not ducks. I put up that. But and then we did a trip to Wolf Hollow in late March, and the red-tailed hawk went by. And then we had this interesting shot of 3 different age groups eagles. Second, third, and fourth year eagles. Thought that was kind of an interesting shot. Welcome here, and we're doing our feeding eBird 101 class, and then went out for a walk out of Downy woodpecker. In Springton Manor, we had these turkey vultures sitting in a tree. You know, I know I called the Muscovy duck ugly. But for some reason, this one's beautiful to me. I don't know. It's something wrong with me, I guess. Springton Manor, we had the eastern bluebird carrying nesting material. And in Struble Lake, our annual tax day trip, horned larks in the field. And Binky Lee, we had like 90 double-crested cormorants fly over these. Very interesting. Back Wolf's Hollow, another trip there. We had the white-breasted nuthatch. And that's it. So thank you all the photographers that gave their photographs.
Okay, good.
Thanks for sharing all those wonderful pictures.
Thank
Turn
you.
off the
Can
recording.
you hear me? With an echo. This is the last meeting of the year. Check the website for trips over the summer, and we meet again in October is when meetings start again. Did everybody hear that? Did anybody hear that?
Meetings start in October.
Yep.
Okay, yes, all right. Meeting
you.
adjourned.
Thank you very much. It's good to see everybody.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
likewise.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. That was
Bye.
really,
Bye.
that was fun. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.